Inside the Lords this week has been, to say the least, infuriating, and I warn you, I'm not in a great mood. The problem is that I put myself down to speak on a range of questions. I wasn't balloted, I wasn't selected. I did get in to ask a question on net zero and austerity around green issues, but I was expecting to be speaking on a range of issues. But today there's been PMQs in the Commons, just up there, and in fact there's been lots of technical problems, and people have said this is useless. I mean, having these Parliament, whether it's the Commons or if it's the Lords, going through the motions with this hybrid system is just not holding people to account. Somebody suggests that every parliamentarian should get a vaccine so they can come in, and although people would say queue jumping, there's a point there. There is something wrong with having Parliament carry on, but not really. And you do feel as though everything is not able to hold the cabinet, the people who run things, Boris Johnson et al. To account. So I'm infuriated by what's going on. But this isn't just a moan about me, not getting my questions in. I do think there is something about the hollowing out of the parliamentary system during lockdown, which is unhelpful, because it's the very time you would want there to be massive scrutiny of legislation that's going through either of the houses. And just to tell you, how frustrating it is, Kate Hoey did get selected for 2 questions, one on fisheries, one on the Northern Irish victims of terrorism and their pensions. She was on the list, but they didn't arrive at her. And why not? Because eventually you think, oh, everyone's rambling on too much. And yet in some ways I want people to have time to discuss things. So I have got a slot on an important debate tomorrow on anti-Semitism on campus. And I was glad the Lords announced we're going to have special time for these key debates. Yes, I thought, great attempts at getting something discussed properly. I've been given 1 minute. Each of us 1 minute, so it won't be a real debate. Yesterday, David Davis, and I only know this from Twitter, put in a bill on academic freedom on campus. An important bill, even if it was a private member's one. There was 4 people in the chamber, and the only reason I know it happened, because he put it on Twitter. So it just feels wrong to me. One of the interesting discussions this week, though, was about the mental health white paper that's coming up. It won't be legislation for a year, but based on Professor Sir Simon Wesley, who's spoken at many Battle of Ideas events that I've organised, and we don't agree on Brexit, but on mental health he is the man. He's recommended a whole range of things that's going to be turned into legislation. I noticed during that debate, though, and I feel passionately about mental health issues, that it became a vehicle through which everybody critiqued the lockdown. So actually, there's no criticism of the lockdown, except when you say people are cracking up and having a mental health crisis. I feel uncomfortable about that. I'm not quite sure that describes exactly what's going on. I do understand that if you're anything like me, and it might well explain my bad mood, that actually we're all tearing our hair out. We all feel so disempowered, not sure what to do, empty of sociability and our fellow citizens, that you can feel like you're cracking up. But I don't know that we want to describe everything through that lens. I think actually there's a really rational reason why we're not coping. But when it comes to, for example, young people, when they describe, which often young people do, their harrowing ways of dealing with teenage angst, what I would normally say, and they kind of say, I'm having a mental health crisis, and I say, it's not a mental health crisis, it's called teenage blues, I understand it. Normally what you do to tell them to get out of it is stop thinking about themselves, get out of the house, do something, act on the world, transcend the limits. Well, you can't say that now because they're forced into the house. And I feel like we've all become teenagers. The only thing we can think about is ourselves because there's nothing to do. They've kind of robbed public life of its content. And that means that we haven't even got interesting things to talk about, have we? Because if you're not doing anything, what do you even talk with your family about? You just basically, have you had a good day, dear? No, well, I moved from the kitchen to the living room. And genuinely, this is not good for any of us. And it's not good for politics either. The one thing that we should be able to talk about, or the only thing left to talk about, though, is our attitude to lockdown, to the vaccines. whether we think it's going well, when lockdown will end, to have views on that. And of course, millions of people are doing just that. The over 80-year-olds, delighted with themselves being vaccinated, seem to be full of zest to see their grandchildren, to go travelling, to do whatever. But we're kind of now told in that one area where we should be able to now say, okay, we've had the vaccines, this is good, when are we leaving this state of absolute purgatory? We're told we can't discuss it. One of the most disconcerting things that's happened this week, the last 2 weeks, has been a concerted attempt at delegitimising any querying of the lockdown or government policy in relation to dealing with coronavirus and describe it as COVID denial. And then systematically to traduce people's reputations. There are undoubtedly people with wacky theories, there are conspiratorial people, there are people who've made mistakes in their analysis and said there wouldn't be a second wave. However, this is a time when we should be openly discussing this because we've got nothing else to discuss. So I'm very worried about that attack on free speech. And so to finish, I think that free speech is the one thing we've really got to fight to defend, and that cannot become the new normal, that you shut down debate. It's absolutely essential we carry on arguing and not be intimidated by getting these terrible labels attached to us. And I continue in that vein to come into the Lords and do my best to, when I get the opportunity, argue freely. Finally, for next week, there is a new bill on domestic abuse and it goes to committee stage. I've already had one little speech on it a couple of weeks ago. I've never seen a whole bill through, so at committee stage you actually have to know every aspect of the bill, so I've got a lot of reading to do, and I will be intervening in committee stage next Monday and Wednesday, so I will be fully participating in legislation. But the one thing that you can say is that the assumption is that we will all just, because it's about domestic abuse, not be critical. We will not raise objections. We will go along with things. And I'm not prepared to do that. In the spirit of free speech and in the spirit of scepticism, it's important to scrutinise properly. And that means asking difficult questions. And whether that's about lockdown, COVID or domestic abuse, we should all carry on in that vein. So good luck if you're feeling as fed up as I am, but we will get there. They will let us go eventually. It's the feeling that we're waiting for them to do it, but don't let them grab your minds now. That bit can be free at least.